For more on this landmark meeting, let's speak to Stephen Zunes. He's Professor of Politics and Director of the Middle Eastern Studies at the University of San Francisco. Professor Zunes, good to have you back on the show. Let's start with what President Trump said. He's exploring the possibility of normalizing relations with Syria, which sounds like a much bigger deal than simply lifting sanctions. So please help us understand the true significance of this possibility.
There's been a growing sentiment among international observers, indeed some bipartisan members of Congress, that despite the rather notorious past of the Syrian president, that he really is trying to put the country together, that he's trying to at least have some degree of pluralism, and really wants to try to rebuild this country that's been so devastated that he's willing to put aside his ideological proclivities and frankly do business so that the country can rebuild. And so, and Trump not being constrained, by I think a lot of the traditions of U.S. foreign policy and the long-term policies. He does what he wants, pretty much. That he was able to actually go ahead in what apparently is a pretty major break from the direction of U.S. policy for a number of decades towards that country.
Professor Zunes, Donald Trump remains a deal maker, as everyone keeps pointing out. So this deal presumably is not going to come without conditions. So what does Donald Trump want from Syria in return for this recognition and the lifting of sanctions?
It's pretty clear he wants to make sure that any remnants of terrorist activity is suppressed, and he apparently got an agreement that the U.S. could use military force to go after the suspected terrorists. He also wanted to make clear that the government was not a security threat to Israel, that it was interested in pursuing peace on some level. But apparently there is some other business, talk of a Trump Tower in Damascus, so that's kind of hard to picture at this point. I think he really does seem to be willing to pursue some kind of normal relations, despite the fact that the roots of the dominant force in government were with these anti-American extremists.
And is recognition of Israel somewhere in the mix as well down the road?
Well, for decades, even under the Assads, they had been clear they were willing to recognize Israel in return for Israel returning the Golan region that Israel captured in the 1967 war. Trump ended up being the first, and so far only, in the United States, the only government in the world to formally recognize Israel's illegal annexation of that territory, which is contrary to a series of UN Security Council resolutions. I think the idea of Syria making peace is not a new one or a profound departure. The question is, under what conditions will Syria still push to get their land back, and might Trump be willing to push Israel to go along?
Mm. And Professor, I want to get your thoughts on what Mr. Trump said in his speech in Riyadh, where he said that the U.S. would no longer be giving you all lectures on how to live, and your own destinies is your own way. Does it signal a significant change in U.S. policy towards the Middle East? And what sort of geopolitical implications would this have for the region?
Well, there have been criticisms from both the left and the right some time about U.S. intervention in the Middle East, particularly around the Iraq War. Indeed, it was a support of the Iraq War by both Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden that helped lead to the rise of Trump, who really pushed this idea that we should not get involved in these endless overseas wars. The other flip side, of course, while I think he pleases those on the left for arguing the U.S. should hold back in terms of military intervention, his idea of, you do it your own way would seem to imply a lack of concern about the horrific human rights record and the misogynist policies and corruption and quite a few other things that more reformist elements in the region and around the world would like to see shifted. But it is rather interesting just to see, these initiatives, by the Trump administration that is causing a lot of reverberations in Washington and some unlikely alliances between a number of ideological tendencies who have critiqued U.S. and Middle East policy in recent years.
Mm. And we saw another day of fanfare in Qatar, the second leg of his Middle East tour. Talk to us about the economic and industrial implications of the aviation agreements in particular signed in Doha, especially for Boeing, which is still recovering from safety crisis and trade headwinds and so on.
Yeah, well, safety crisis was certainly one thing that hurt their fortunes. And of course, the tariffs war with China really hurt them as well. But Qatar Airways is one of the world's leading carriers. And so the fact that they are agreeing to go with Boeing as opposed to European or other manufacturers, I think is certainly a coup for President Trump and the United States. And I think basically these Gulf leaders see a kindred spirit in Trump and vice versa. These are basically strong men who don't really care that much about certain moral or ethical issues or even certain legal niceties when it comes to corruption or whatever. They want to make money. They want to make deals. They're transactional in their approach to diplomacy. They don't look at the broader vision, whether it be human rights or international law or even security. They are mostly interested in making money, and I think in that sense they have they found both sides have found someone they can work with.
And Qatari's offer of a $400 million luxury aircraft, I mean, it's causing quite a stir. Just how serious are the ethical? Yes. Yeah, please.
Well, pretty big. I mean, this is rather extraordinary. I mean, the U.S. law is pretty clear that presidents cannot receive these kinds of gifts. It's even enshrined in our Constitution. But as we've seen in quite a bit of domestic policy as well, Trump has not been adhering very much to longstanding principles, constitutional or otherwise, and with a majority in both houses of Congress, they're not about to impeach him or take any other kind of actions. But this sort of thing has been troubling even among some of his strongest supporters. I mean, whether or not there is a quid pro quo aside, it certainly doesn't look good, and and so as a result, it is certainly raising eyebrows.
All right, Professor Zunes, we have to leave it there. Appreciate your time and your thoughts as always. We've been speaking to Stephen Zunes, Professor of Politics and Director of Middle Eastern Studies at the University of San Francisco.